Hello, everyone. I'm Brooks Raiford, president of the North Carolina Technology Association, or NC Tech. I'd like to welcome you to today's NC Tech Talk. NC Tech has been working to include virtual sessions as part of our overall programming, but the current stay-at-home orders have accelerated that plan and provided us with the opportunity to shift to more of a virtual approach. To that end, we have built several different online offerings, including our NC Tech Talk series, where we engage with key leaders from across North Carolina to talk about what's on their mind and how their organization is adapting to today's environment. We've had a great response to these sessions, so thank you for taking the time to join us. We are recording today's conversation, and we will send you a link to it in our follow-up. Over the past few years, North Carolina has become a hotbed for tech startups, many of which have seen tremendous growth and success. One of those success stories has been AvidXchange, based in Charlotte. We're excited to have Michael Praeger, co-founder and CEO, here with us today to share their story and talk a bit about how they're managing through our current circumstances. Our format will start with some welcoming remarks from our sponsor, and then I'll take it from there and ask Mike several prepared questions. We invite our listeners to use the Q&A function to submit additional questions for Mike, and I'll do my best to filter those and pose them throughout today's discussion. Note that there is a separate chat function. Please use that only if you have technical problems or questions, and my fellow staff members will respond to those. But for questions to submit, use the Q&A function. To kick things off, I'd like to thank the sponsor for today's session, Rhythm Systems, and invite their Client Success Director, Max Belisle, to say a few words of welcome. Max?
Yeah, thanks, Brooks. I'll keep it short and sweet so we can dive into today's discussion. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of NC Tech community and sponsoring today's event, especially during this time of uncertainty and the future of work. So Rhythm Systems is proud to work with some of the top tech companies in North Carolina and beyond, including AvidXchange, SentryOne, Pendo, and Dude Solutions. We're a Charlotte-born boutique consulting and SaaS company. We specialize in the mid-market to drive focus, alignment, and accountability to our clients' growth strategy. We've been around for almost 15 years, and over that time, we've helped hundreds of organizations and exec teams develop and refine their goals with clear annual and quarterly plans that are execution ready. And our software provides a platform for visibility, communication, and cross-functional communication or collaboration. To are we working on the right things? How are those things progressing? And knowing when and where they go off track. Rhythm helps form successful habits around thinking about future growth, planning for that growth, and doing the work to achieve that growth. NC Tech will follow up with and include my email from there. I'd love to talk to all of you, answer any questions regarding recovery or post-COVID strategy. And if there's any one thing I could ask of you today, it's if anyone knows a speakeasy type barber shop in the Charlotte area, please email me that information because I clearly need a haircut. But thanks, Brooks, Tracy, Emily, everybody at NC Tech for making today happen, and I look forward to hearing Michael speak. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Max, and thanks for Rhythm Systems' support of the association. Again, I'm especially pleased to have as our featured guest, Mike Praeger, CEO and co-founder of AvidXchange. Since founding the company, Mike has led it to secure the coveted title of Global Unicorn by CB Insights 3 years in a row, with a $1 billion plus valuation by investors, 5,500 customers, and 500,000 suppliers nationwide. With an affinity for entrepreneurism and leadership, coupled with expertise on fintech and payments innovation, Mike has led AvidXchange to equip customers with the right products to implement accounts payable and payment automation, eliminating paper invoices and paper checks, and increasing visibility into financials. Mike remains active in organizations like the Young Presidents Organization, serves on the advisory board of the North Carolina Technology Association, and is a board member of the Charlotte City Center Partners, Care Partners, and E2D. Mike, thanks for taking the time to be with us today, and welcome to NC Tech.
Thanks, Brooke. Happy to be here, and appreciate the intro.
Sure thing. I'm going to plow right in with some of these introductory questions. First, AvidXchange has seen tremendous growth over the past few years and continues on that trajectory. Tell us a little bit about how you and your team built the foundation for success and how that has positioned you to weather things like the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So to provide a little context, 2019 marked the 8th consecutive year that we've grown on average 40%. So to do that for 8 years in a row, what we found is every 18 months, everything that you're building is breaking and you have to rebuild it. And so I think, we've, gotten to accustomed to lots of change and how we think about kind of innovation in our business at every step of kind of our growth spectrum. And so that's just been kind of accustomed to, kind of how we operated the the business to date. But I think it roots back to, as a company, our number one core value is that we're passionate about making our customers successful, and everything starts with the customer. And be able to solve real problems that our customers were working through, which really relates, very simply to how do you eliminate the paper invoice and the paper check to their core accounts payable business process is what, we've been working on now for over 20 years, or, this is our 20th year. And I think, our growth rate accelerated about 8 years ago, mainly because of, it was when we added payment to our platform, but it's also when customers started getting comfortable with having key financial, both processes and data in the cloud-based environment. And so you started seeing, companies, over Raleigh, like, Red Hat and, the Salesforces, Concurs, NetSuite, start gaining traction, and our traction kind of started along with that. And, dial forward to today, and I think, most of the CFOs that we talk to would expect that, we're operating in the cloud, which is very different than when, our first 10 years of existence. I think, we've been, in this high growth, dynamic environment, for the last, 8 years or so. And what I'd say is, there's lots of chaos. And, one of our sponsors today, Rhythm Systems, has been a partner with us actually since we got started, and actually has helped bring what I say some consistency to how we manage our chaos. So there's a very defined, processes and rhythms per se that we use in the business that helps create some consistency among the chaos that we're creating every day as part of our growth.
So in relation to how all that affects the way you work under current circumstances, you built a business on essentially going virtual for your customers.
Yeah.
But you've got a lot of people, and I'm guessing that before this current circumstance befell us, a lot of those people were in a building. So talk a little bit about how that's going now.
Yeah, so it's a great question because first of all, yes, we, being the company that we are and supporting the numbers of, 6,000 customers in the U.S. and one of the, kind of little trivia questions about AvidXchange, we're now up to 2,000 banks that use AvidXchange to manage their internal accounts payable and payment process. So 1 in 4 banks now in the U.S. use AvidXchange. So business continuity is very, dear to our hearts. And one of the main reasons why, we created a couple of years ago, our West Coast Operations Center in Salt Lake City is for, business continuity reasons. But I would say of everything we, game planned related to business continuity, being here, headquartered in Charlotte, most of the scenarios were all weather related and how, if something, bad was happening in Charlotte, we could, kind of transition volume and traffic to Salt Lake City or one of our other, regional offices. We never game planned a scenario that, no one across our 7 offices could actually go into the office. That wasn't one of the scenarios that we ever contemplated. We spent, the middle of March, like a lot of people, kind of figuring out how to make this work. We made the decision on, Friday, the March 13th, that we're going to transition to work from home, which we began implementing on that Monday. And there was a handful of groups that we never envisioned would be able to work remotely because of security and some other forms. We have $140 billion on an annual basis that goes to our platform, and so there's a high degree of sensitivity to security. And so our team very quickly identified, how we could deploy, those same security standards in a remote environment. And then the biggest stumbling block that we had to get 100% of our workforce remote is we had, of our 1,500 people, we had, 300-400 people that worked on desktops and did not have laptop environments. So we, scrambled with our friends from Microsoft and from Dell, to get some emergency orders that, middle week in March. And, by that Thursday, the week of the 16th, we were 100% deployed and work from home. And I would say I was probably one of the, most nervous people about what it would do to productivity in our production, about meeting customers' expectations. Again, when you're in the payments business, there's a high degree of, service levels and expectations that our customers have around our operations. And, and we never operated in a 100% remote environment before. So I think we all had some questions about, what exactly was going to happen. And I think, we were all very pleasantly surprised that, like most companies, we recognized that we can actually operate pretty effectively in a home-based environment. And one of the things I think that just happens at the beginning is it's a new concept. So there's a lot of energy around it. And what we found is that in the first 60 days, people just worked incredible hours. And it was hard to turn it off and on because you're in kind of crisis firefighting type mode. But there's a limit to how long you can operate in that type of mode. And I think now, one of the challenges for our team is, how do you now continue to work from home, but more of a normalized pace, not this heightened crisis pace that probably everyone else feels like they've been in. And I think that's our current challenge because, like everyone else, probably, everyone at Avid canceled their spring break or any time off, and has been working, 24/7 for the last 60 days to execute for customers. And how do we now, kind of create some normalcy so it can be a long-term type of program and certainly have an everlasting impact on our future work from home strategies.
Well, you kind of touched on my next question. I'll ask it anyway because you focused primarily on what you might consider to be your greatest challenge during this time. The other half of that is what is your greatest success? You already talked about the ability to move a lot of bodies into a virtual environment. Maybe that's it. But is there anything else you would point to in terms of whether it's really seeing no hiccup in how you serve your customers? What other kinds of successes could you point to?
Yeah, so I mean, just from a business perspective, it's been pretty interesting. So I must say, managing crisis is not new to us. We were started in April of 2000, in the middle of the dot-com era. We navigated through 9/11, all kinds of hurricanes. Being here in Charlotte, it was the ice storm of 2002, to today. But I'd say today's COVID-19 crisis is very different than the other ones. However, I would say from success standpoint, we knew that our customer base would be resilient based on navigating through some past crises. But one of the things that this one was a little bit different in is that we've seen a big acceleration on the new customer side. And if you think about it, it makes sense because one of the things that a lot of companies realize is in a business continuity plan, it's really hard to get your bills paid from home if you're operating in a paper-based environment. There's not too many CFOs that are going to send, AP clerks or specialists home with a stack of pre-printed corporate check stock to cut checks on their home-based, printers, right? That doesn't really happen. And so we've heard stories about, okay, we're sending everybody home except the AP staff has to stay in the office. And a lot of companies had to pay their staff extra to incent them to stay in the office environment, or they just literally couldn't get their bills paid. And so, the uptick in what I'll say, customer, acceleration due to business continuity is one that we've seen in the current environment in a much bigger impact than we've ever seen in past crises. We recently did some surveying, actually, of middle market, which may ring true to a lot of the people on today's webinar in North Carolina, but of the middle market, companies that we surveyed today, about 60% said they did have defined business continuity plans. 40% didn't even have a business continuity plan and was really kind of, scrambling to make it up, over the last couple of months. Of the 40 or the 60% that did have a plan, like 37% of them said, we had a plan, but we went to implement it. We realized we didn't have all the technology that we needed to actually execute the plan, right? Well, we could send people home and they had laptops, everything else, but they didn't have the right software like an accounts payable. So we actually had to bring them back to the office so they could actually do their job. And I think, whether it's, accounts payable automation or any back office process, I think this will be the defining catalyst for, companies and CFOs to say, we have to move back office processes to cloud-based environments so we can continue to operate our business going forward. And so I think this will be that defining catalyst going forward in a very positive way. I would say, the biggest negative, just to kind of finish the second part of the question for us, has been, we have seen, payment volumes across existing customers degrade, 5 to 15%, depending on the cohort, which is consistent to what we saw in kind of past crisis situations. But I would say for us now is how do we keep our team energized in this work from home environment, and when it creates, more of that normalcy, because it is unsustainable to operate in kind of crisis firefighting mode for a sustained period of time. So I think, helping our teammates actually, encourage them to take their vacation, to take, to work more standard business hours, not, to 10 o'clock every night, those type of things is things that we're encouraging our team to do.
Well, that leads actually well into the next question I have for you, which is, and by the way, for those who are listening in, again, use the Q&A function if you would like to submit questions for me to relay to Michael. We've had you as a guest before on various programs we've offered, and you talk about how deliberate you and your team have been in building a corporate culture. And so you just sort of touched on that a little bit to help make sure that work-life balance is respected, and even in this very different, sudden environment, being purposeful about that is kind of an element of corporate culture. Share a bit more about that, kind of the development of what you have considered to be your corporate culture, and how does that come into play as you work remotely now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and one that I've spoken on before. First of all, I'll say for any growth company, maintaining the culture you've had, from your early entrepreneurial days is super hard to do. It's not easy, and some of the things that we've learned is, number one is you have to be very intentional, and you have to also teach it, because it doesn't happen upon itself. And so we're very intentional about our culture, as well as how we teach it. And I think we start by the headline is we actually call it our DNA, and our DNA is designed to create a high performance environment, performance to results, which is evident by 8 years of growing at 40% a year would be an example. And within that, there's a handful of mindsets that we want people to have in the business. And the number one mindset is a growth mindset. And what we mean by that is we want people themselves individually that want to grow. If people say, I just want a job, I just want a paycheck, but if I do my same job for the next 20 years, I'll be happy. Those aren't the best people to come to AvidXchange. We want people that actually want to grow themselves and want to see themselves doing something different in 3, 5, 10 years in the business and continue to evolve and grow with the business. So having a growth mindset is critical. The second one is it's all about the customer. We're a customer-centric organization. Doesn't matter whether you're on the front lines of sales or customer success like Max is at Rhythm Systems, or it's somebody in development, or somebody in finance. We want people to be thinking about the customer, and everybody can have an impact on the customer. And then the last one, which is a little bit of an evolution of how we've grown as a business, because at the beginning you could get a lot of stuff done individually in the business, and today I would say nobody does a very good job of individually getting anything done. It's all very collaborative, and we call it working better together. And if you can't work cross-functionally as part of a team to execute, your function or your mission, you're not going to do well at AvidXchange. So I think, we've learned that there's a number of mindsets that we use to help define our culture that then are supported by, what we call kind of our 6 core values, which are kind of the foundation. So that's how we think of our culture. We recruit based on our culture, and, we try our best to teach the culture, though, at the pace of growth and adding as many new people as we had, I'll be the first one to say it's not an easy task.
Well, I'll segue into a follow-up then. So you talked a bit about your culture, what's important to you, what that culture is, and now in a sudden shift to where people aren't physically together anymore, to speak of, and that could go on for a while. And at the beginning or during all of this, you've also gotten another large round of funding, so congratulations on that, which of course implies growth. So not only are you large already and now dispersed, trying to maintain a culture you're trying to build, you will probably be adding a lot of people in the near term who are brand new and won't be in a building to gain that culture. So talk a little bit about the challenge of that and how you're addressing it.
Yeah, so first of all, I would say, it's a work in process in terms of, how to effectively add people just to, get them, onboarded effectively into an organization in a remote environment. And so like everyone else, I don't think that's something that we've ever contemplated we'd have to do. So there's a lot of things that are being, kind of created for the first time and tried out and learn. And we're a big believer in, kind of iterative learning and keep improving the process as we are executing it. But I would say, first of all, the capital side, we feel super fortunate. It was kind of interesting because we had really done the first close of our, kind of capital event, and which we closed on $250 million. And based on demand that we had, we decided, kind of early this year, let's, add, some additional capital for not only, some acceleration of investments that we wanted to make in the business, but also to have, more, dry powder and flexibility for, future, acquisitions or M&A type of, opportunities, just to be opportunistic. And this was before COVID was even COVID, right? And so that was even part of our decision. And so, we feel fortunate that, 2 Mondays ago, we closed on the balance and ended up raising, just under $390 million as part of the round, which gives us, just a phenomenal balance sheet in the current environment, to make all the investments that we want in the business, as well as being opportunistic. So one, feels super fortunate about, that we were able to get that done and have just a phenomenal set of great investors that are both, private as well as public company type of investors to support the business. But I would say, we're making investments focused on, how, the pace of innovation of our product feature set, combined with, kind of our internal scalability and how we think about the next evolution of growth. And then the third one is on exactly what we're talking about, is on talent. And how do we, use the current environment to, get the best and brightest talent. And certainly we think there's great opportunities, both here locally in North Carolina to do that, as well as, on a national basis. So those are the areas that we're, making investments in. And then identifying how do we get that talent onboarded is something that we have a lot of people spending a lot of time working on right now, so we can be as effective as we were when we were in the office environment.
Mike, when you were in the pre-COVID environment, I'm guessing that it would be rare for someone to be hired, extended an offer, who's never met in person at least one Avid employee. Now you probably don't have anybody that you're hiring that has met an Avid employee through the process. Yeah. How is that making things either a challenge, or how has it made it different?
Yeah, so one of the things that we had instituted actually a couple years ago was video interviewing, and what we used it for, we were using it for the first, say, 1 or 2 rounds of initial interviews before kind of that, in-person type, kind of final interview round. So we'd already been, kind of on this pace just from the standpoint of being more efficient because of the volume of people that we're adding. So we've, kind of, I think gotten pretty good at executing, video-based, interviews. Certainly, I think there's a new definition of what meeting somebody in person means, in terms of, like we're doing on today's, Zoom call as an example. And I think, it's not the same, but I think in some ways it is effective. And I've been in discussions with some of our talent team and recruiters. In some way, we actually feel that it is just or sometimes more effective because there's actually it's a weird psychology of the types of questions I think you can ask somebody, that's different when you're sitting next to them in person. When you're sitting, across from each other on a video screen, there's a different type of, kind of questioning, I think, that people feel comfortable asking that maybe don't feel as comfortable when you're in a physical room with somebody. And so I think there's an interesting dynamic that we think that actually, some of the interviewing could actually be more effective. But certainly, I think where we have the most questions about it is, when you're talking about positions of leadership and how we, manage this environment. And certainly, I think relying more on, some of the traditional, references and talking to, leaders that may have worked with, other leaders in the past to get that firsthand knowledge.
Well, we're actually having to pivot as well. We used to, for years now, we've hosted as the association in-person tech job fairs. We've done them in regions, so in Charlotte and the Triangle in particular, where companies can come and have a booth there, have representatives there. Candidates can come and actually meet face-to-face with hiring companies. But there are some disadvantages to that. One is, first, not everybody is in a position to show up to a job fair, either because of the logistics of it, of where they are and where the fair is, or their own work schedule if they're currently working. They may not be excited about showing up in person if they're looking while working elsewhere, and for fear that, that might be noticed. And the employers don't really meet everybody. They just meet the ones who happen to stand in line long enough to talk to them at their booth. And so we have converted what were to be in-person job fairs this spring in Raleigh area and the Charlotte area into a virtual platform that we're now going to use on May the 21st. You all are actually participating in that, so thank you for that. And it will be a way for hundreds and hundreds of people, regardless, and unlimited really, of people who are interested to participate no matter where they are without being constricted to a 2 or 3 hour span of time. And the employers are able to do chat and video and do offline appointments and all sorts of things through that in a way that would be difficult in an in-person environment. And so for us, just like this program we're doing with you today and the job fair that we're going to do virtually in a week or two, some of these are things we had probably been a little behind in going down the road on anyway. And they will be an integral part of our programming even when things get back to some semblance of normal. And I'm sure that will be true for your organization and others as to how they deploy technology in ways that they've learned and experienced by necessity now, maybe not because of careful planning, but because of reaction to the situation that we're in. I want to move on a little bit here. The governor has announced a set of phases as to how and when the economy will be reopened, to use the term of the day. And so a lot of organizations are beginning to talk about the return to office for their teams and what that looks like, how that might be phased, how do you determine who is either able to come back in or who you might require to come back in. So talk a little bit about AvidXchange's strategy for that gradual return to at least the potential of having a lot of people back in the office space that you have.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question, and one that obviously we've been spending a lot of time on, and I think like the governors indicated, and here in Charlotte, on a close working group with the county manager Dina Dioria and Mayor Lyles in terms of the opening of Charlotte, and we're planning to take that same approach in terms of a phased approach, and I think it's starting with really what I'll say the volunteer aspects of it. And one of the things that we've seen across our business is that there's some people who've excelled in working at home, but there's other people where it's maybe a hardship for them to work in a home environment, or that, it's causing them more anxiety or problems than it would be in the office. And so what we want to do is really, start by offering flexibility, and for those people that want to come back to the office because they feel that's the best place for them, to work and be productive, they can do that as part of phase one, and the rest of the team will stay working at home, and then take it as part of a kind of a slower phased approach. But I think always erring the side of giving people the flexibility, and if people have a preference of where they want to be, do our best to accommodate those preferences, certainly over the next several months as we kind of begin this phase back approach. And I think, like a lot of companies, there'll be a lot of learnings that go, as part of it. And I think, one of the biggest learnings that we're trying to plan for is, there may be, more, incidents of teammates getting the virus in the future than companies have already experienced. So how do you manage when you're going to have teammates that do get infected going forward, and manage through those? And so you don't have these big boomerang effects of, we're back in the office, no, we're back at home, and they try to create some consistency, as well as, some protocols, so people know exactly what to expect when we do have those situations. And I think, like all of us, no one's done it yet, so it's going to be a big learning experience. But I think, one thing about, NC Tech and, the entrepreneurial technology community is that everyone's very open to sharing. And so one of the things that's happened during this whole, crisis is I spend, many nights actually on the phone with other CEOs of other, software technology and other companies, here in the Carolinas, talking about, how it's impacting their business, what are the strategies they're thinking about, and really collaborating on the best way to execute this. Again, because nobody, it's not an experience set that anyone can pull through. And we're all kind of going through it for the first time. So, I've been really encouraged about, everybody's willingness to share information and really collaborate with each other, which is, I think, a great testament to the overall technology community, in North Carolina.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I think part of the challenge for those of us who are parts of other leadership groups, fellow CEOs of organizations, or in your case, you mentioned leaders there in Charlotte, that you're part of a group, that's a whole lot of extra webinar time or web conference time that often occurs all around the normal work hours of your day. So it's a challenge to be on all the time, well beyond 8 to 5. Let me sort of wrap up with a broad question for you. We have been for several cycles now polling several hundred leaders in the tech community in North Carolina, to include our board of directors, our board of advisors, select tech CEOs like yourself, and also a handful of leaders, the top state leader for non-headquartered major tech hubs like a Microsoft there in Charlotte campus, or a Cisco, or a IBM, and so on. And we did this at the very end of March, and released the results. Just 10 quick questions, some of which had to do with how is this situation affecting hiring within your organization? Is it ongoing? Is it frozen? Are you laying off? Some of the questions were about work from home. What percentage of your workforce in North Carolina is working from home? Do you anticipate that to remain, to become the new normal, or will we revert back to sort of pre-virus state one day? And we also asked some predictive questions. So I'm going to ask you one now to get your gut at the moment.
Go for it.
We asked, one of the questions is, what month do you anticipate that in-person meetings and events and gatherings will begin to occur? And then similarly, what month do you predict that noticeable improvement in the economy will begin to occur? And we gave them a choice of starting, because we did this at the end of March, we gave them May, June, July, August, September, and then later than September. And we've done this poll now mid-month and end of month. So end of March, mid-April, end of April. We're about to do the mid-May one later this week. And we're releasing this each time. It's gotten a lot of press because people are really interested in what leaders are thinking. And I've been interested in looking at the trends. Which of those questions have seen a shift? And so 2 that have seen a shift. One is the month in which you think that the economy will begin to see noticeable improvement. That has shifted a bit later in the cycle than people were saying back at the end of March. Those who are saying after September are much higher than they were saying that back in March. That does square with some economic forecasts that we've hosted as to fourth quarter really being when that might start to be seen. So I'm curious what you think. Do you think, first of all, when do you think we'll start to see rebound? And then the companion question, what type of recovery, if you had to pick a letter of the alphabet, we're all using them these days, V-shaped, U-shaped, W-shaped, or L-shaped, which would be terrible. Give us some thoughts on that.
So first of all, I think, it has changed from the beginning in terms of, I think at the beginning, everyone was, probably, more hoping that it would be, a shorter time frame and a quicker recovery. But where we sit today, obviously I think Q2 is going to be a really difficult quarter for most companies. And what I see though is I think Q3 is going to be a quarter when people are now starting to see, okay, what the other side may look like, and they're starting to plan for it.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that we're going to have a really strong Q4 because I think there's going to be a large pent-up demand. Now, I'll preface that by saying I think, our world is business to business, and we don't operate very much in the consumer environment. So my, kind of thought process is more around business to business type activity.
Right.
But I think we're going to see a really strong Q4. I think a lot of the purchasing, just like at AvidXchange, we've pushed off, all of our CapEx spending over the last 60, 70 days. But we're not going to push it off forever. I mean, it's going to happen later this year because we need it to execute our business going into next year. And so I think you're going to see a really strong, kind of Q4 timeframe. I think Q3 we'll probably see, pockets of that. But I think people are going to be more in planning mode of, okay, how do we come back and work to, kind of accelerate our business going into 21. And I think also from a planning purpose, no longer are people thinking about, kind of, end of the year plans, 6-month plans. I think people are now thinking about an 18-month planning cycle where, kind of the second half of this year combined with next year, and are thinking about, 18 months, what does this look like? And I don't have a letter for the recovery. I think mine is a logo. And I think the best, example I've seen is the Nike swoosh. So I think it's going to be like a Nike swoosh type of recovery. We're going to see an acceleration up and then probably a much longer tail to get back to where we were.
Gotcha. We'll have to add that to our options on the poll, maybe. We do have a question that has popped in while you were speaking, and if you can give us a short but interesting answer, I'll throw it at you before I wrap up.
Okay.
But I like the question because it ties into some things you were touching on earlier with culture and so on. And that is, what are some ways that you have invested in your employees during this time, whether it's professional development opportunities, appreciation gestures, et cetera, just to keep everyone motivated during this period?
Yeah, so a couple things that we did. The first is just to make them productive at home. Is one of the things we learned when we kind of initially rolled everyone out was they didn't have the equipment they needed to be as productive. And so the two big things that we didn't think real necessarily about were having second, third monitors, as well as their desk chair. There's only so many days you can work, on your, dining room table, wooden chair. Right? And so we allowed employees to come back to the office and say, take your chair home with you. You are comfortable, and we'll support you in having multiple monitors so you can kind of resemble your work, your kind of office environment at home for productivity. So that was kind of one thing that we did. The other thing that we did was rampantly increase communication. So day one, we started a 7:30 executive team call every morning that we talk about what did we learn from the day before, any actions we need to take as an executive team during that day. And then we end every day with actually a company-wide almost version of a 15-minute town hall meeting that we talk about the wins of the day. And I think that's really important because there's so much negative energy and news in this world, whether it be on the TV, the media cycles, the internet. And we view that, the work environment and at AvidXchange is actually, for a lot of our teammates, the area that they get the positive news and kind of increase their psyche from a positivity perspective and optimism that, things are going to improve. And so we end each day with talking about the wins of the day that happened across customers, whatever functional group it may be, a software release, things of that nature, to provide that optimism, to our teammates every day.
Great. Well, Mike, I just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today for this session. Just want to remind everyone to check our site, nctech.org, where you'll see updated and new offerings, including our speaker series like this one. I think I misspoke earlier about a date, so I want to correct that. The job fair that I mentioned, the virtual one, is May the 20th. That's available on our website as well if interested as a potential employer. If you're listening in today, we're still taking employers. And again, you'll see the lineup of these NC Tech Talks. Mike is one of our earlier ones. We've had several already. We have quite a few on tap that are being scheduled, and they're being marked when scheduled and available for registration. I think one of the people who's listening in today is a future featured guest. One of our board members is Carolyn Saki. She is COO of Capital Markets at the New York Stock Exchange and heads up the IPO activity there. She is a longtime board member of ours, and the exchange is a longtime member. And so she'll be featured coming up. I'm sure it'll be a great conversation with her. You mentioned Mayor Lyles in Charlotte, Mike. She and Mayor Baldwin in Raleigh will jointly be interviewed by me in one of these sessions to talk about how larger metros are dealing with the effects of the economy and COVID-19. So it's a health issue, and it's an economic issue, of course, for governments. And so that should be very interesting as well. Quite a few on tap. Thanks again, too, to Rhythm Systems for sponsoring today's session. And Mike, thank you for your time and for AvidXchange's great corporate citizenship. Thanks to all of our viewers for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Brooks.